Hello, I'm Mike, and I'm going to talk to you today about understanding your players. Not your player characters, your players specifically. The 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide says this about understanding your players. The success of a D&D game hinges on your ability to entertain the other players at the table, whereas their role is to create characters, the protagonists of the campaign, breathe life into them, and help steer the campaign through their characters' actions. Your role is to keep the players, and yourself, interested and immersed in the world you've created, and to let their characters do awesome things. I think we can all agree on that. This is on page 6 of the DMG, by the way. Here's where we get to the stuff that I really want to talk about. Knowing what your players enjoy most about the D&D game helps you create and run adventures that they will remember and enjoy. Once you know which of the following activities each player in your group enjoys the most, you can tailor adventures that satisfy your players' preferences as much as possible, thus keeping them engaged. Okay, so basically we need to know what each of our players responds to most in the game so we can tailor a game that they're going to enjoy. Absolutely true, 100%, I agree with this. But then they give these examples. I'm not going to read every one of them, but I'm going to tell you what they all are, and then I'm going to read one of them to you. There is acting, exploring, instigating, fighting, optimizing, problem solving, and storytelling. Okay, probably a pretty good breakdown of different types of players, but the actual descriptions themselves I find a little lacking. For example, here's acting. Players who enjoy acting like getting into character and speaking in their characters' voices. Role players at heart, they enjoy social interactions with NPCs, monsters, and their fellow party members. Engage players who like acting by giving them opportunities to develop their characters' personalities and backgrounds, allowing them to interact regularly with NPCs, adding role-playing elements to combat encounters, incorporating elements from their characters' backstories into your adventures. Now this is good, and the fact that they have advice for each of those different categories is also good. But I can't help but think of another book that had a very similar breakdown, but also got into a little bit more detail about each of the categories, and one that I wish this book had taken just a little bit longer and gotten into some of that detail as well. Because while I do love 5th edition, and I do think it is the strongest version of the game, at least in my experience, I got started as a Dungeon Master running 4th edition. My dog wants to eat Geralt of Rivia. And I think the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide has a much more interesting section about different types of players. Now this probably will not be the last time that I dig back into one of my 4th edition books and see what we can learn from them. Because as much as I understand the edition wars, and in hindsight, I get why people bounced off of this when it did not feel to them like Dungeons & Dragons. I think 4th edition is generally, based on my memory and how I remember playing it, a pretty solid game. And there was a lot of really good advice in here and a lot of things that I miss from it that, while I don't think are worth going back to in lieu of 5th edition, I like 5th edition more, there's a couple babies like this that I think got thrown out with the bathwater. Everybody plays D&D to have fun, but different people get their enjoyment from different aspects of the game. If you're preparing and running a game for a group of players, understanding player motivations, what they enjoy about the game and what makes them happiest when they play, helps you build a harmonious group of players and a fun game for all. Now here's a major difference. These are described not as types of players, well, a little bit as types of players, but specifically as player motivations, and they point out that you can have more than one. Most players enjoy many aspects of the game at different times. For convenience, we define the primary player motivations as types of players: actors, explorers, instigators, power gamers, slayers, storytellers, thinkers, and watchers. And already, I think that list is a lot more interesting than the one that's in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. For example, in this version, we don't just get problem solving, we get thinkers. Instead of fighting, because they all do fighting, we get slayers, which I think is a little bit more accurate. And we get watchers, which is a huge difference. It is not included in the 5th edition DMG, and I think it should be, because I think there is a mentality around D&D that watchers are not enjoying the game or not as valuable to the game, and I don't like that, because I don't think that's true. Now I want to get into a little bit more about what I really like about this version of this list, about what they do really well. So let's look at actor again. An actor likes to pretend to be her character. There was a push here to use more inclusive pronouns, but they really didn't get the idea of they-them pronouns yet, so we see a lot more her because of it. She emphasizes character development that has nothing to do with numbers and powers, trying to make her character seem to be a real person in the fantasy world. She enjoys interacting with the rest of the group, with characters and monsters in the game world. and with the fantasy world in general by speaking in character and describing her character's actions in the first person. The actor values narrative game elements over mechanical ones. Unlike the storyteller, she values her character's personality and motivations over other story elements. An actor provides PC background emphasizing personality, plays according to her character's motivations, prefers scenes where she can portray her character, often prefers social encounters to fights. Engage the actor by facilitating her PC's personality and background development, providing roleplay encounters, emphasizing her character's personality at times, recruiting her to help create narrative campaign elements. Be sure that the actor doesn't bore the other players by talking to everyone and everything, and justify disruptive actions as being in character. Holy crap, why do we not still do this in 5th edition? Why do we not still have a thing in the DMG that says, hey, I know that everyone plays in different ways, and no type is bad or good, but there is bad behavior that could accompany any one of these. Because I think that's one of the big problems that I see with D&D discourse, is that there is this presumed right way to play. But what I like about this book is it points out that every different type of player can manifest different types of unproductive or disruptive or problematic activities or behavior at the table. I've played with people who've had this problem. I probably have been a player who's had some of these problems, especially in the actor or storyteller categories. And they go on. I think every section is really interesting. I'm actually going to read them out because I think it's useful for us to hear this and have it referenced somewhere where you can find it, because it's not in the DMG in 5th edition, and it should have been. Explorer. An explorer loves to see new places in the fantasy world and to meet the residents of such places, fair and foul. All an explorer needs is the promise of an interesting locale or different culture, and off he goes to see that place. The explorer wants to experience the wonders that the game world has to offer. He also wants to know that there's more out there to find. He presses for details, proper names of characters and places, descriptions of the environment, and some idea of what's over the next hill. He's sometimes involved in the adventure plot and his character motivations. The explorer is a close kin to both the actor and the storyteller. The wonder of new discoveries is what is key to keeping the explorer happy. An explorer seeks out new experiences in the game's setting, likes learning hidden facts and locating lost items and places, enjoys atmosphere as much as combat and story, advances the plot by being willing to move ever on, including encounter elements that call for exploration, rewarding curiosity and willingness to explore, providing rich descriptions and using cool maps and props, recruiting him to map for the party. Be sure that the explorer doesn't use knowledge of the game world to his own advantage, bore the other players, or exhaust you with his thirst for detail. That's great, and yeah, I have no notes. It's very good. Now let's get into the Instigator, because this is an interesting one. An Instigator enjoys making things happen. She has no patience for careful planning or deliberation. She'll open an obviously trapped chest just to see what happens. She provokes authority figures and opens dungeon doors to bring more monsters into an already difficult fight. The Instigator loves the vicarious thrill of taking enormous risks and sometimes just making bad choices. The Instigator can be disruptive, but she can also be a lot of fun for the other players. Things rarely grind to a halt with an Instigator in the group, and the stories that get retold after the game session often revolve around whatever crazy thing the Instigator did this week. An Instigator likes to make things happen, takes crazy risks and makes deliberately bad choices, thrives in combat and dislikes having nothing to do, takes decisive action when things grind to a halt. Engage the Instigator by including objects and encounters that invite experimentation, letting her actions put the characters in a tight spot but not kill them all, including encounters with non-player characters who are as feisty as she is. Be sure that the Instigator doesn't get the rest of the group killed, attack the other PCs or their allies. Now let's get to one of the really loaded ones. I mean, I think Instigator arguably was, and maybe even actor, but really, Power Gamer. A Power Gamer thrives on gaining levels and loves the cool abilities that come with those levels. He defeats monsters to take their stuff and use that stuff against future enemies. The story and role-playing are secondary to action and awesome abilities and magic items. Most players have a little Power Gamer in them. Phrasing. A couple of the core elements of fun in the D&D game are the accumulation of power and the use of that power to accomplish astonishing deeds. Nothing is wrong with enjoying that in the game. A Power Gamer optimizes character attributes for combat performance, pores over supplements for better character options, spends less time on story and role-playing elements, prefers combat to other kinds of encounters. Engage the Power Gamer by stressing story element rewards such as quest XP, using a desired magic item as an adventure hook, it's a great one, facilitating access to new options and powers, including encounters that emphasize his PC's attributes. Be sure that the power gamer doesn't become a lot more powerful than the other characters, try to take more than his share of the treasure, and treat the other characters as his lackeys. Then we get the Slayer. Once every generation, a Slayer is born. The Slayer is like the power gamer, but she is even easier to please. She emphasizes kicking the tar out of monsters. Maybe she does so to let off a little steam in a safe way, or she likes the joy of feeling superior. Perhaps it's the pleasure of having the power to mete out punishment to villains. D&D combat is thrilling. Few other aspects of the game put a character in such apparent jeopardy. Beating the bad guys is a clear success. Most players enjoy these D&D elements, but the Slayer seeks them foremost. A Slayer optimizes like a power gamer, might pick simple options to get into the action quicker, spends less time on story and roleplay elements, wants to fight monsters and take bold action all the time. Engage the Slayer by springing an unexpected battle when the Slayer looks bored, making some battles simple and others more complex, vividly describing the havoc the Slayer wreaks with powers, recruiting her to track initiative during combat. Be sure that the Slayer doesn't ruin adventures by killing monsters the characters should talk to. Rush past social and skill challenge encounters to the next fight. Next up, we've got the Storyteller. The Storyteller is a player who prefers the narrative of the game to individual character motivations and personality. This player sees the game as an ongoing chronicle of events in the fantasy world, and he wants to see where the tale goes. For the Storyteller, the rules are there to support the game's ongoing story. He believes that when the rules get in the way, the narrative should win. Compromise for the sake of the story is more important than individual character motivations. A Storyteller often provides an extensive background for his PC, works hard to make sure his character fits the story, likes dramatic scenes and recurring characters, prefers adventures that include at least some plot. Engage the Storyteller by facilitating his PC's background development, using his background to help define adventures and non-player characters, including at least a little plot in every adventure, recruiting him to record important events and encounters. Be sure that the Storyteller doesn't insist on making his character the center of the story, dictate other characters' actions to fit his idea of the story. The Thinker. A thinker likes to make careful choices, reflecting on challenges and the best way to overcome them. She also enjoys herself most when her planning results in success with minimal risk and use of resources. Solving a challenge in a creative way is more important to the thinker than character power or role-playing issues. In fact, the thinker might prefer sound tactics to acting in character or straightforward brute force battle. A thinker engages any challenge as a puzzle to be solved, chooses her actions carefully for the best possible result, is happy to win without action, drama, or tension, prefers time to consider options over bold action. Engage the thinker by including encounters that require problem-solving skills, rewarding planning and tactics with in-game benefits, occasionally allowing a smart plan to cause a one-sided win, recruiting her to help come up with quests. That's an interesting one. I wish they'd go into a little bit more detail about that. Be sure that the thinker doesn't constantly tell the other players what to do, grind the game to a halt when considering tactical options. In the last category, and one that is completely underrepresented in the 5th edition DMG, that I really think should have been, Watcher. A Watcher is a casual player who comes to the game because he wants to be part of the social event. A Watcher might be shy or just really laid back. He wants to participate, but he doesn't really care if he's deeply immersed, and he doesn't want to be too assertive or too involved in the details of the game, rules, or story. He enjoys the game by being part of a social circle. A Watcher shows up to be part of the group, helps calm disputes by not being as attached to the game, often fills a hole in the PC group, facilitating the fun. Engage the Watcher by never forcing him to be more involved than he wants, accepting that he's fine with his Watcher status. That's a tough one for a lot of DMs, I know that for a fact. Prompting him when he needs it. We could probably do a whole video about when he might need it, but maybe we will another time. Be sure that the Watcher doesn't distract the other players with TV, a video game, or surfing the internet. Disappear from the table at crucial moments. Do you see why I think this is so much stronger? I really think that so much of this was left out, and for no other reason than maybe just page count. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not going to say they didn't put stuff of value in this book. I use this one a lot. We're definitely going to talk about some more uses of the Dungeon Master's Guide. But for this particular section, I really think they had it right here. And the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide is not alone here. There are plenty of books that talk about the different types of characters, but I think that this book, I think that the 4th edition guide is one of the only ones that gives the most useful, actionable information. If you use this list, you can be a lot better prepared to handle different types of players. And not only by handling it when things go wrong, although there is a really useful section for that in each of these player categories, But also it helps you customize each of your sessions to make sure there's something there for everyone to keep them all engaged in play. Now that I've gone back to this, I'm going to start incorporating this into my prep. I'm going to start figuring out what each of my players would probably be most classified as, or which two they might be classified as. Like, when I was a player, I was probably most an actor and a storyteller. But sometimes I was an instigator. And I think that now that I have that in my head again, now that I'm thinking about these different types of players again, I can use that information to make my games a lot more engaging and thrilling for the people at my table. But that's just me. What do you think? Was this valuable to you? There's a lot of other stuff in this book, and I might do more videos about it in the future, so let me know in the comments if that's something that might interest you. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and subscribe to see more. I have videos twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. And if you want to be notified as soon as they come out, hit the bell, because that's what that does. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, play fair and have fun.